Ladies and gentlemen, strap on your boots. It's time for Crant's Crappy Sports Section. Righto, and welcome back to the Barron Files podcast sports sections, Crant's Crappy Sports Section today. We have a special episode today, Crant, don't we?
Yeah, I'm irrelevant today. It's your sports section today. Actually,
Well,
this is your brainchild.
This is one that I've been wanting to do for a while. Dylan Alexander does a lot of work with, well, not a lot of work with, but
we mentioned him last time.
He does a lot of work with young players that are coming through the AFL system, and which translates really well for fantasy football.
100%.
And
the bargain buys.
That's it. I haven't done fantasy football for years. I've decided to do fantasy football this year, and I've recruited Dylan to help me out with a team to pick, and we thought that maybe a few of the listeners that are doing this might enjoy some tips from Dylan as well.
For sure, and as a result, you're also forcing me to do it.
Yes, absolutely. So Trent has to do a fantasy football team as well, and hopefully I absolutely destroy him week in, week out. We've got a league, which I'll give you the code shortly. I'll have to get that up.
If there's one thing on the planet I'm worse at than being an athlete, it's fantasy sport. So.
But no, well, the beauty is, though, we've actually got our first
special guest.
We've got our first special guest, which is Dylan Alexander, and he joins us now. Dylan, how you going?
Thanks for having me on, guys. Happy to be here.
Excellent, no worries. So, Dylan, you've been doing fantasy football for a number of years now. You've spent multiple weeks inside the top 100 out of hundreds of thousands of people that actually play Supercoach and you're exclusively fantasy football, or do you do Supercoach as well?
I pretty much stay in the fantasy football lane. I have had a couple of seasons at Supercoach, but I don't know. I find the format of fantasy football just a little bit sort of easier to get involved with, just that it's kind of raw stats and you don't have to worry about like the percentages of game time and all that kind of stuff. And if you start delving into two different games, I feel like it does your head in a little bit. So definitely sticking in that lane.
I actually agree. I like the raw stats. Is it now, like I said, this is the first time I've played fantasy football for a very long time. Is it still just 3 points for a kick, 1 point for a handball, 3 points against for a free kick against sort of thing, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's still that just same old school format. So yeah, 3 points for a kick, 2 for a handball, 1 for a hit out, 4 for a tackle. So
I don't
think tackle's obviously massive, which helps those like center, more inside players, center bounce players. But I think they've sort of kept that side of it pretty much the same throughout the years. The main changes that have happened have been more kind of back end with the app and lockouts and all of those sorts of things.
So the lockout. So if I remember, have you ever done it before, Crant?
Years ago.
So what it used to be is years ago, once it got to sort of Friday game time at the bounce, once the ball was bounced, there was no more trades to be made.
The whole round was locked out.
Yeah, the whole round was locked out. I understand now, Dylan, that it opens back up after the game, or is it open during the game still?
Yeah, that's correct. So they've sort of, I guess it's the AFL going for that kind of overall watch time, or like people being on the app time. So they want people on there all the time. So now it's kind of open. So across the weekend, if there's an injury or a late withdrawal right before a game, you can actually still get in there and trade that player. So up until the point that they're actually locked out or, in the middle of a game, you can still make changes to your team, which I think 5-10 years ago, that wasn't really the case, and you were pretty much locked out over the entire weekend. So it's kind of nice to be able to go in there and change it, but at the same time, it does get pretty hard to manage across the weekend, particularly if you're busy.
Yeah, like if you're working or you're out drinking with your mates or whatever, or if you're at the game and you don't realise that this change has been made until late, you miss it.
I'm going to struggle to get it done in fucking 5 days.
Yeah, and you're screwed then, because I guess I think I prefer the lockout, because then if it's locked out, then everyone's locked out.
Yeah,
Whereas
exactly.
if I'm working and say Brent's not working, that means that he's got the opportunity to change his team if he needs to, and I can't, which gives him a huge advantage when I'm on night shift.
Gives him the upper hand. And from the platform's perspective, they're kind of just worried about the fact that he can get on there and generate some revenue.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. Different world, isn't it?
So, can we analyse Trent's team? Trent, have you got your team with you?
I haven't even finished it.
That's all right. Can we have half your team?
I haven't started.
Oh, you haven't started your team.
I was hoping I didn't come under this pressure. I've signed
It
up.
can't be as bad as yours, Hep.
I've signed up.
Here we go. We're getting some shit flung now. All right.
Nah, mine will be dog shit. I'll pick every shit player on most teams, but yeah.
But like, I want you to play to win, and this is why I've recruited.
Oh no, I'm not going to do
Dylan.
it deliberately. I'll just out of fucking my inability to be good at anything.
But
I'll fuck it up.
This is the reason I have recruited Dylan, is to give us that edge against
Oh, for
people.
sure. We can talk about. I'd like to talk about some of the ones he suggested and maybe why he wants.
Yeah.
To
So
go
we
that way.
spoke to Dylan earlier on in the week, and he gave us some suggestions. Just first, though, I want to see if I can. I'm going to give out the code for our league, which eludes me. Oh, no, here it is here. So the code is for our league, if you've got a fantasy football team for AFL, our league code is R3W 4FJST. That's R for Romeo, 3, W for Whiskey, 4, F for Foxtrot, J for Juliet. That's a 5, not an S. 5, T for Tango.
Would you like to start again?
The first time I read it was with an S, but
you
it was
like to
actually the
start
second last one is a 5. So it's R3W4FJ5T. You'll be able to figure it out from there.
Yeah, we can replay it. So Clayton Oliver was pretty good for Melbourne yesterday. He looks fit. He's undervalued, you'd think?
100%. Yeah, he's got to be one of the first players picked in your team for sure. I mean, he's been an absolute fantasy stud for 5, probably closer to 10 years now. So you got to get him in the team, and it was pretty much just that, whatever happened last year with the kind of the off-field stuff, I guess, that kind of held him back. He wasn't really fit throughout the season. He is, as a midfielder too, like if we talk about the different positions and which players really elevate in fantasy, like he's the perfect player because he's one that gets those tackles in. He's an inside midfielder, but he's also sort of that, to use a soccer term, like a box-to-box kind of player. Like he gets involved in the transition, gets lots of handballs and linkage play and stuff like that too. So, yeah, he's an absolute lock.
100%. As you said about the fantasy, he's pretty good, but he's probably not the cleanest player. But that's not as much of a knockback, is it, with fantasy? Like it's not as
exactly,
much as
exactly. So you look at like he and Petrarca, for example, as probably the two best midfielders at Melbourne. Petrarca's more that sort of offensive threat, but he probably doesn't get quite as much accumulation as Clayton Oliver. And the fact that Clayton Oliver kicks a grubby little ball inside forward 50 doesn't really matter for fantasy.
Doesn't knock him.
Yeah, so fantasy. Yeah, so for those listening at home, Super Coach, it matters about your efficiency. That's an issue.
Yeah,
whereas with fantasy, ball touches your boot, that's 3 points straight up. Isn't that correct?
That's exactly right. So a player like Tim Taranto, who loves to kick the ball off the ground, he's great because you'll even get 3 points for that.
Excellent. I've got Tim Taranto.
Perfect. I'm just in general, I'm a pretty big Caleb Daniel fan, but I reckon he's one of the best field kicks in the competition. He'll play every week, no doubt, at North Melbourne, so he's a good buying as well.
Yeah, I actually, if you put Caleb Daniel into the ex-Bulldogs, there's 3 of them. If you're looking at Caleb Daniel, Jack McRae, Bailey Smith, they've all found new homes away from the Western Bulldogs. They all represent, for different reasons, a lot of value. I've actually been spending a lot of time down at the North Melbourne training sessions over pre-season, watching some of the rookies down there, and Caleb Daniel's locked into that sort of main distributor role for the Kangaroos. So they just don't really have anybody else that can kind of play that role. So they want to get the ball in his hands at all times. And I guess one of the things that's like evolved in fantasy over the years as well is the understanding of the way teams play. Like if we talk about that time, Happy, off the top, you said like 10 years ago that we used to play, we kind of just used to pick the players that played for the best teams. But there's more of an understanding now that you can kind of get game styles. Some teams want to control the ball a lot more and they play a lot more like uncontested marking game and stuff like that. North definitely like to do that. So Caleb Daniel, he'd be one of my first players picked for sure.
He'll probably take a fair few of the kickouts too. And North Melbourne in recent times, the ball's spent a fair bit of time in the defensive area. So if he plays,
exactly. There'll be teams kicking big scores with a lot of behinds kicked in the game, and Daniel's going to be all over that.
Yeah.
So Dylan's actually a North Melbourne supporter.
Oh, right.
He has elected not to leave his team like you did those years
Similar
ago.
to your good self. Yeah. You've changed twice, actually.
However,
I've only changed. Oh, I got traded, though. It's different. Me and Peter Bell got traded to Fremantle.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
part of
However,
it, yeah.
Dylan did mention that he's probably going to drop North Melbourne like a hot rocket when Tassie come in as well.
Right. We're saying it's probably not a great move now, Dill, because I think they've stacked some incredible talent. Their next 5 years could be pretty special, really, if they can.
For sure. They're definitely going to get a bounce up the ladder in the next couple of years for sure. I mean, I still think there's a lot of holes in that team, particularly from a key position perspective. Like that defence, I watched that preseason game against Melbourne the other week, and it's a bit of a shit show back there. But sort of blind leading the blind with Core and Comben and those sorts of guys. But we'll get there.
I think when you similar to what Hawthorn did, I know you got the same coach, not just for that reason. I think when it comes right, it'll happen pretty quickly for you. And also, as you say, it's easy to attract talent, though, when you're at the right end of the ladder. So all of a sudden, if a couple of them keys are free agency, it's easy to attract them when you're in the top 6 rather than the bottom 4 year on year.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess just because it has been, for North, it's been so bad over the last 5 years. As you said, they've been able to collect those draft picks and bring in some pretty good players organically as well.
Yeah, I think. And LDU stays, you think?
I think he'll stay. Everything that I'm hearing from people around the club and fans that kind of are a little bit more in the know, they all say that he's going to stay. I mean, you never know, really. Particularly, I think if a team like Hawthorn, what they're doing looks pretty exciting at the moment. So
and that annoys me.
I think
that annoys me. I hate Hawthorn with a passion.
Yeah, me too.
And it annoys me that they're going well. And they come home with a wet sail last year. And it bothers me.
They did, but honestly, I'm not saying they won't be a good team. They could possibly be, but it's a game plan that teams do figure out quickly. They play run and gun and they play quickly. So Hawthorn, it wouldn't surprise me if they were one of the teams to drop out, to be honest. Look, they could be top 4, but at the same time, I think they could get found out a little bit too. They are still quite young. So.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because they've got I do agree with you on they went so big last year, but I guess they've still even got a player like Will Day, who was injured for most of last year. He comes back in. He's an A-grade midfielder.
Actually, if
they picked up like an LDU as well, I reckon they'd be unstoppable in the midfield. But I think he's the key. North can't lose LDU because we don't have another big-bodied, strong, powerful midfielder like that.
No, he got some elite talent. And what about is Sicily a bit of a risk because the way Hawthorn is shaping? Is it possible he plays forward? I know he played back in the preseason game the other day, but I'm not sure how they fit him all in. Is it a risk with Sicily given he gets so much the ball?
For sure, yeah. Well, you're on a good point there. So I think he scored in in a fantasy sense the other day. I think he did score about a 120 or a 130. So obviously he's putting up some big numbers when he's back there. But I guess there's two things. There's the fact that he might push forward and be a bit of a threat for them down there when they get... Because I don't think they've got all of their defenders back either. So it could be one where they just fling him forward. And if he's forward, you don't want him in your fantasy team. And then you kind of don't know how it's going to work with Barras and Battle coming into that team. Do they play Frost as that sort of more lockdown kind of defender in there as well? So there's too many... For me, as someone that's played fantasy, there's just too many moving parts there that you just sort of let it go, I think.
Oh, I agree,
so when you say that, Dylan, you mentioned that he might, if he goes forward, you don't want him in your fantasy team. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? You don't want anyone forward of centre in your fantasy?
Well, he's just not going to get as much of the ball.
Yeah. That's correct. You don't really want anyone in your fantasy team. There's probably a couple of little exceptions, but you don't want anyone forward of the ball because it's just so much more difficult to win your possessions in that area of the ground. How the game's evolved with the forward press and everything, there's so much space in the defensive 50. So all of the easy ball comes back there. You're going to get players off the half-back line. Even if you look at the top scorers, if you just go through and do a search by the top scorers, it's outside of the rucks. A lot of the top guys now are either sort of outside midfielders or players that are working off the half-back line. Get a lot of those +6s for the mark kick. So you definitely don't want anyone as a key position player or a small forward even.
So that is a hard thing, isn't it? Because, a lot of people's favourite players do play forward of the ball, like your big forwards and your small forwards. They're great to watch, but no good in it.
You got to take the romance out of it.
Yeah, you do. You got to bet with your head, not your heart.
That's right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So are you worried at all about Bailey Smith's knee? I know obviously 12 months out, he represents a lot of value, but it is. I look at it as a little bit of a risk. What's your thoughts?
I've probably changed a little bit with knee injuries. I reckon 10 years ago, you'd be looking at players like that. How's he going to come back? I've just seen so many players come back from knees recently, like Will Ashcroft, probably the example that sits in my head. Players just come back now, and if they do all of the work and they do all the rehab properly, I guess there's always a chance and there's a higher risk of re-injury, but I don't think you're really going to take that. Given that he missed an entire season, he's really had like plenty of time off football. He looks pretty good when you actually watch him in pre-season. It doesn't look like he's labouring or anything, so I wouldn't. And given the fact that he's got, like, maybe if he was a midfield-only player, but the fact that you can pick him up as a forward player where, like we just kind of mentioned in that previous topic, like forwards are harder to find. If they've got forward status, it kind of puts a premium on them, particularly if they're playing in the midfield, in the centre bounce rotation like Bailey Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And the beauty of that is those three dogs that we mentioned earlier on, Jack McRae, Bailey Smith and Caleb Daniel, we can have them all in the forward line.
Yeah, exactly. And
Jack and
that's,
yeah, right.
Yeah, you can have them all in the forward line.
I don't think I've ever seen Jack McRae go forward of the ball.
well, that was pretty much the impetus for him leaving, right? So last year, Bevo, he is definitely an inside mid. Like, that's been his role for his entire career. But Bevo, for some inexplicable reason, just parked him as kind of like that high half forward. So he was still coming up to stoppage a little bit. But it took 10 disposals off him, and that's why he's so cheap. Caleb Daniel behind the ball, he's going to get a lot of easy kicks back there. It's not that the halfback position's an easy position to play, but you just get so much more space to operate back there.
Yeah.
I think, and McRae, fantasy side, I think he's a gun in general. You know, people knock him, he doesn't hurt you, whatever. I disagree. If you're getting 35 to 38 touches every week, the opposition haven't got the ball.
That's exactly right.
I think he's a fantastic player. I think the Saints they've done well there.
Yeah, I'm probably a bit like, I'm a bit of a McRae hater, I suppose. Like, I feel like he sort of lacks penetration in his game. So I'm probably in that bracket. But from a fantasy perspective, tick, tick, tick.
You are quite brutal when it comes to picking your fantasy team, aren't you, Dylan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to be ruthless.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's it. So Dylan, actually, funny, quick story about Dylan. One year round one in fantasy football, Dylan finished second overall.
Shit.
Yes, and there was a year of a loophole, right, where you know how Richmond and Carlton always play the first game of the round on a Thursday? Well, they opened it up, so they actually opened the game back up, the app back up, or the program back up, so you could actually make a trade after that first game.
Yeah, okay.
Which means you could change. You could have picked a vice captain. So vice captain gets double points if your captain doesn't play, right?
Yeah, yep.
So you could pick a vice captain for the first game, and then if you wanted to, if your vice captain didn't go any good, you could select a captain, and then he would, that he's playing, and he would get the double points. Now, Dylan selected Bryce Gibbs this year, and he got 110 points. So Dylan thought, well, hey, that's a pretty good score. I'm just going to keep that. Didn't select a captain. He was going to pick Dane Swan. That was his backup plan. Dane Swan came out, got 143. Dylan finishes second.
Yeah, dude.
Misses out on a weekly prize.
Which is...
What was the weekly prize back then, Dill? It was...
I think it was $1,000. I think it was a K.
$1,000. So he missed out on $1,000. Back then, $1,000 is a lot of money now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Correct. But
it's like 3 beers at the beach hotel now. $1,000.
That's right. Yeah. But so he knows what he's talking about, right? He finishes in that. Like I said, he spends multiple weeks in that top 100. But like he said, though, if something does go wrong, it's catastrophic for your team.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so
it's risky. Yeah, for sure.
Everything's risk
For sure.
But Dill, just so we've spoken about some of the players that are already in the AFL. But I think the hardest part of it, now this is where Dylan's expertise comes into it, because no one's in this space.
Really fires.
Yeah, no one's really in this space, and that is the young players that have just been drafted or haven't played a game yet or have played minimal games in the AFL that are like your basement dollar. Have you got any players, Dill, that you're going to lock in? You're locking in for season 2025 to play more than they don't?
Yeah, 100%. This is definitely a moving space because you obviously get a lot of information out of the preseason games. So I've done a few of these, and it is, you kind of look at the role some players play, and obviously it comes a lot into the team that they get drafted to and all of that kind of stuff for opportunity. I think the first one that you've got to jump on here, and this one's been the trickiest one throughout the preseason, so it's Levi Ashcroft, one of the biggest ball winners in the Coates Talent League last year in the entire under-18 competition. He looks ready to play. He looks like a man at 18 years old. You probably saw him in the preseason games just racking up the ball, even from like a wing or a half forward position, which I just said is not ideal.
Yes.
The question for me for him across the entire preseason has been, is he actually going to break into that Brisbane Lions team?
Yeah.
Because they're so stacked. They've just won a premiership. He can't really come in and just replace someone like a Jasper Fletcher. They don't really have any injuries in those areas as well. But if he is anywhere even close to being named, if you see his name on that team sheet, you've got to pick him because he's just a unbelievable ball winner.
What price point's he at?
So they do the rookies now based on their draft pick. So he goes in at priced at pick 5. So he's the 5th most expensive rookie, which puts him at about
300.
He's 332.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
basement
for the people that don't
price
know,
being
there is
230.
there is a salary cap over this. You got to work within a salary cap. You can't just pick. You can't just pick 20 first graders, like, you know.
They're saying he's like a generational talent, which he looks to be that. But as you say, at 330, he probably represents a little bit of a risk too, because he's not a guarantee walk-up start with purely because the team he plays for, is he?
Yeah, that's the payoff with Levi Ashcroft. It's like, is he going to come in? Is he going to be sub for the first couple of games? Because if he scores, if he only plays a quarter and he comes on as a sub and he scores a 30, then his price is going to drop, and there's going to be other rookies that are going to come in and usurp him a little bit. So it's a really tricky one, and you don't know what they're going to do from a tactical point of view as well. But he's got to be at least a major consideration for your team, for sure, just given that if he plays and he plays a full game, I think he came in the practice game the other day and he played half a game and he had 25.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah, like he looks ready. He played one VFL game last year and he had 35 and kicked one. Like he's just doing that sort of thing.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Hasn't he won 3 Coates League premierships? Played since
he has. Yeah, he's been playing in the Sandringham Dragons.
Okay. So there's definitely some talent there.
He's quite freakish. Yeah. So moving along slightly. What about Joe Berry? Do you reckon he's a guarantee to play at Port Adelaide? I think any other year, he's probably a bit stiff where he was. He's probably a top 6 draft pick any other season, but he slid a little bit to Port. What's his chances?
He's a lock to play, Joe Berry. So definitely get him in, and particularly because he is a forward. You're not going to have as many options down there in the forward line. The issue for Joe Berry and why I wouldn't have put him in, say, my top 2 or 3 is just the fact that he is a forward. So, again, coming into an AFL team as a small forward, you're going to get starved a little bit at times. The other player in this same boat is probably someone like an Isaac Kako.
Yeah,
Joe Berry's a little bit different. Yeah. So Joe Berry's a little bit different because he does get a bit higher up the ground and that sort of thing. But it'd be sort of unlikely for a small forward to come in and, straight into the AFL team and rack up sort of 25, 20 touches a game sort of thing. So he's probably going to have games where he's really starved, but he'll also have some great games as well.
Yeah, and the idea is with these young players is you just want them to go up in value, don't you? So you can trade them out and get a better score.
That's
I
it.
suppose. Yeah.
That's the game. So, and a bit more of a smoky. So Levi Ashcroft, Joe Berry, those kind of guys are sort of the known quantities. They're high draft picks, first rounders. But the Saints picked up a guy in the 50s or the 60s in the draft named Hugh Boxall from Western Australia, and he probably wasn't somebody on anyone's mind. But the Saints are sort of in this situation where they don't have an outstanding midfield at the moment. They've got Jack Steele, they've brought in Jack McRae to try to fill things in. They delisted someone like a Seb Ross, so there's still opportunity. And then Matthias Philippou goes down in the preseason, who was going to step into one of those midfield positions. So Hugh Boxall, he's around 190 centimetres as a midfielder, so he's sort of a nice size to come in, very physical, and already looks, very muscular, very physical at the stoppages and that sort of thing. And he's had an awesome preseason. He's looked like one of their best players, to be honest, even at stoppages at just the age of 18. So I'd be seriously considering him, particularly if he's named in that round 1 side.
Yeah, I do have him in my side. And another one from the Saints, Toby, is it Trafalgar?
Toby Travalia. Yep. And he's a really, really good runner. Second in the 2K time trial at the draft combine. So those players tend to come into the AFL and do pretty well if they come into a wing or a half back role where Toby Travalia has been playing. He's been spending most of his time in the preseason on the wing. So those guys that can kind of cover the ground, if you think about players like a Caleb Windsor, who spent his first season on a wing for Melbourne, someone like an Ollie Hollands came in, Dempsey, mature age player last year for Geelong, but they can kind of just cover the ground and they get involved in the transition and the link play, get a lot of +6s on the outside there. So he'd be another one, definitely. And the fact that he's got defender status probably puts him up a bit because most of these rookies have midfield status.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
What about one over West? I would think he's probably likely to play Bo Allen. Have you seen much of Bo?
I have seen a lot of Bo. He's a bit more like, of all the guys we've talked about so far, Bo Allen's probably less of an accumulator. He's a guy with a lot of speed and a lot of power in his game. Not necessarily someone that racks up a lot of the footy. Like even when he was having really impactful games in the under-18s, he was more of like a 15 to 20 touches guy, but he'd impress you doing it. Like he's got a beautiful left foot kick. Does a bit of like running off the half back / going inside and playing midfield, but I don't expect him to get into the midfield in this West Coast team currently. So I think he'll be playing more as sort of a lockdown defender running off a little bit, which sounds like a pretty decent role, but he's not the sort of guy that racks up the footy. And I think he played in the practice game the other day and he only scored about 10 points in that one. So I don't think he'll be... You could start him as a bench position.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I wouldn't be putting him on your field.
I just thought the team he was in, he might be, but yeah, I see your point for sure. Yeah. What about a bit of bias for me here? Murphy Reed's looked pretty good for the Dockers so far. They've got a pretty deep list now, so he's probably not going to play every week, but he's probably a big chance of playing round one after his performances the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and he's probably in that similar boat to Levi Ashcroft, where he's a guy that has absolutely no problems finding the footy. Like you saw him in that game against Melbourne, I think it was yesterday. Yep. Just like he's a real smooth mover, this guy. I compared him in his draft year to someone like a Harry Sheasel. Just one of those players that kind of slows the game down around him, has that awareness, beautiful handball radius. So he's flicking handballs out all over the place for players running on. Lacks a little bit of athleticism, and that was a knock on him as a coming through the draft ranks. But I think he's another one, and you've already seen it so far. If he gets the opportunity, it's just, does he get into that Freo team? Because the midfield's stacked, the small forwards are starting to look stacked with someone like a Shea Bolton coming in. So again, probably looking more like a sub or someone that comes in if there's an injury.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Would you, as you mentioned, Bolton, is he probably gets knocked a little bit at times for his consistency, but with his price point, is he worth it, you think, or you'd be looking elsewhere than Shea Bolton?
I'd be looking elsewhere, and it's that same discussion that we've kind of had throughout this video. Like the fact that he plays so much forward of the ball and he's such a weapon forward of the ball, like if you can move like that, he and Cozzy Pickett's another good example of this. They do come in and play centre bounces, but it's more for impact, and then they push forward because they can turn players inside out when they go inside forward 50, and that's where you want your best players operating there. So he's not going to spend enough time just racking up ball, behind centre. It's all going to be in the front half. And
he'll play the front half.
He's front half and his impact. And he's going to have, like, he'll have the occasional big games, but he's, like, I don't see him averaging much over, like, an 80.
Yeah. I'm Freeman Sport, obviously. We just need him to kick goals, mainly. He's not there to accumulate for the actual team performance. If he can have his 15 and kick 2, that's job done, really, for him.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah. You've got Brayshaw, you've got Sarong to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Plenty of accumulators, yeah.
Have we got any you're obviously ex-Tasmanian. We got any good young Tasmanians coming through, or any Tasmanians that you would put in your side?
Yes, I do actually.
Oh, and this is question at you. Sorry about that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all right. The one that everyone was talking about in the preseason was Ari Schoenmakers, who's like a medium defender. Kind of looks like he could embed in that St Kilda team. He was named as a sub, I think, or an emergency the other day. So I don't think he's close enough to actually put in your team at the moment. The one I'd be looking at, he's played all through the preseason, and with the news that Marcus Bontempelli's gone down with he's going to be out for the first 6 weeks, I'd be looking at Riley Sanders.
Oh,
he is that perfect sort of accumulator style midfielder. He's really good at centre bounce. He's had some big numbers in the VFL last year. I watched him play a couple of games. He had 35 and 37 in the VFL, and he's not going to do that at AFL level. But the fact that Bont's out, Ed Richards is out also early in next season. So he's probably locked down in a spot there now alongside like a Liberatore, a Treloar. He's going to get probably 5 or 6 weeks at the beginning of the season just to get you a score. And then if it's, if he loses a bit of the role, you've got every chance to be able to trade him out, and he's already made value.
And he's a socks up black boots boy too. I quite like that.
Yeah, he's a stand. His old man was pretty old school.
Yeah,
operator.
I'm definitely a socks up man when I play.
Yeah.
When I played.
When you play.
So I do like that. And I actually have Riley Sanders in my team. I didn't even know he was Tasmanian.
I think, his dad was Adam Sanders. He used to play for Launceston.
Yeah, okay.
So,
right,
no, I think Riley looks, he's got them hips that he sort of can't, he's one of them guys you can't tackle, I reckon. I think as he gets on, in 5 years' time, he's going to be one of the big names. He's a huge one for Tassie, actually, 2028. They have to, if he's not in their start midfield in 2028, they've made a huge blue, the Tassie side.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, I forgot what. He had the issue last year where he came off and spat the dummy, and he was
he had a bit of
thrown under the bus. But me personally, if I've just been dragged and I've been made sub, I hate that sub rule. I absolutely cannot stand it. I think it shows passion that he was pissed off.
I'd rather him show passion than... I agree.
Just sit there and go, oh, well, job done. No, be upset. I've got no problem with that, personally.
The thing was, too, there, like, he was playing good footy. It wasn't like... I don't really see I know Bevo's probably trying to, play some psychological games there and challenge him and all of those sorts of things, but he's playing well, and, like, as you said, you'd want... If he just comes off and kind of does the usual thing, it's I think it shows character, like you said, that he can kind of, show his emotions.
No, he was good. I know I really like Bevo. I've always had a bit of soft spot for the Dogs. He's always been a second team, I guess you'd say, but he does do some strange things at times. Whether he overthinks it, even positioning on the ground and sides he'll pick, you just think, wow, where's he going with this? And sometimes it comes off and sometimes it doesn't. But he's probably the coach most under pressure coming into the year, and especially with Bont missing the first 6 weeks. Look, the Dogs, knowing the Dogs, they could be 9-1, but they could be 2-6. You wouldn't know how their year's going to unfold. They're really hard to pick.
They're the same as St Kilda, although St Kilda will probably most likely be no one.
I wouldn't say St Kilda's got the list the Dogs have got, though. I think the Dogs are a very good team at their best. So
I agree. I think they've got some guns. And when you've got a player like Sam Darcy in the front half, I think anything can happen.
He can snap it like a small forward, and he's 2 meters tall and massive. Can run like the way he's got every tool you want. That kid.
I think he's going to be something. I reckon he's something now.
He's already been in his own.
I think he's going to improve exponentially over the next 2 or 3 years, and I think he's going to be really, really exciting to watch.
I agree.
Dill, one more question from me, Dill, before I let you go. Who's your captain this year? Who's going to be your captain? Do you think?
In the fantasy side, that's actually
first pick captain. Who do you think is the number one player that has to be picked in every side this year? Is there one or?
No, I don't think there's ever. I don't play the game like that. I don't think there's like absolute. I mean, I say there's no must-haves. Like Caleb Daniels a must-have, but he's more of a mid-price player. It's because he's cheap. Like you're not going to play him as your captain.
You're not giving him the C, are you?
You don't need to. You don't ever have to be scared by somebody hurting you, I think. I mean, and that player, if you're looking at like you want a perma captain, probably the best players over the last few years that have been perma captains, you're looking at rucks really, like Tristan Sherry, Rowan Marshall, Max Gawn. They've probably been the biggest scorers in the game. So if you did want to just bank that double points, so like a really big scoring player, probably Tristan Sherry would be your guy.
Okay.
I usually hunt a little bit more value than that because I think if you get too many guys like that, then your teams... You're relying on too many rookies to come in and score your points at the bottom end if you go for those really expensive guys. What I've done this year is probably revolve my team around someone like a Tim Taranto or a Connor Rozee, who sort of have that scoring pedigree of the top end.
Yeah.
But they're a little bit cheaper, just under the top bracket. So they'll probably be my captains. Probably Connor Rozee in the early stages of the season.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm looking at probably Sheasel. I think I've got Sheasel in my back line. I think I might give him the big C to start with and see how that goes.
Sheasel would be an excellent choice. Yeah.
Have you ran Sheasel in your side?
He's not currently in my side, but he's one that has come in and out. So he's definitely on the cards. And I think you can, a player like Sheasel, who's got defensive status, you can run him. He'll be playing as a permanent centre bounce midfielder this year. I will say one other player that I think people need to get on in the ruck, and that is, with the news of an injury to Mark Pitnet from the Blues, I think you got to get on Tom de Koning.
Don't you dare tell them that. He's my ruckman.
I do like Tom. I'm not sure $12 million offers and that are right. Can you see him being what they probably saying he's going to be, Dill? Or do you think he's slightly overrated for what he's done so far, or on potential he's worth the investment?
Yeah, like he's over. Like he hasn't done. I suppose he's overrated in that sense, but I do see the. I do see the potential and the upside of him. Like there's not many players that have that sort of power and athleticism and just the chaos that he causes. Like when I watch Carlton play and he's playing in the ruck, like how much more exciting is it just
100%.
him smashing the ball forward, getting it to the outside, running after it, getting involved in the transition play, like compared to a Pitnet who's more of that sort of old school sort of tap ruckman.
Yeah.
I think that's where the game is going with those sort of more athletic type ruckmen. So yeah, I'm a big fan. Yeah, but as far as like if you just go on what he's done in the last couple of years, like obviously not enough to have. He's not a Bontempelli figure in the game.
No,
he's not your franchise at this stage. But yeah, I just want to touch briefly on just before we go on Collingwood. Would you look at someone? Is Dan Houston too expensive for what he produces? Like obviously he's an elite user, but he's probably not the huge leather poisoning sort of type guy that gets high 30s often. Uses it well, obviously. Or also, what about a Jeremy Howe? I know he's a bit of a flight risk, but he can rack him up at times. What's your thoughts on the Collingwood boys?
Interesting there. So Dan Houston, pre-season, I was super keen on Dan Houston. Like moving club and moving away from a team like Port Adelaide, who were a very front half team. So there's not a lot of ball in the back half for players at Port Adelaide. So none of their defenders or their distributors really rack up the ball back there. And I was like, he's going to Collingwood. Collingwood love moving the ball, transitioning the ball from the back half, and it's a big part of their game, so he's going to be huge. But then they moved Josh Dacos back there as well. And Josh Dacos, another guy that doesn't mind racking up the footy, and he seems to be taking up a lot of the ball that Dan Houston sort of would be getting back there. So they're kind of sharing the amount of ball that's available to them. So I've kind of gone off Dan Houston, and I think he'll be more of an impact per possession guy and more of that, like you said, like that kind of 20 to 25 guy. So I'd probably be steering. I mean, he's still an option if you wanted to go there and you sort of backed in the fact that he's going to that team. Jeremy Howe, I wouldn't be touching. I never really touch guys that purely rely on intercepting.
Yeah, okay.
He's not really used as a distributor back there. You've got plenty of guys like I said, Josh Dacos and Houston back there, and even Quaynor sort of gets in on that as well. So he's kind of got to there's probably got to be a good matchup for him. Like he plays on a small and then he gets 5 to 10 intercept marks, and that's unsustainable for the season.
For sure, yeah. I was a bit confused, as you said about Dacos going back. With Dacos there, Quaynor, Darcy Moore, intercepts and plays a Rance role at times. Probably not as much the last couple of years as he used to. Do you think they needed to go as hard as they did for Houston? I just made the decision to go for him a bit strange, I thought, the way they're going to, if that's how they're going to line up.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one. So, if you look back at what they did in 2023, they had Nick Dacos off the half-back line, and they were the best team at scoring, like D50 transition, basically winning the ball back off the opposition in the D50, going coast to coast and being able to score. They were the best team in that area. You fast forward to 2024, they bring Nick Dacos in as a permanent centre bounce mid. He sort of loses that ability inside to be able to hit the targets that he does when he's behind the ball. So they lost that. They went from the best team from D50 transition to, I think, the 15th best team from D50 transition. So I think with Houston and Dacos flipping them behind the ball, and that's what they're going for. They want to go back to that sort of free-wheeling, sort of moving the ball quickly from the back half. I think built into that, losing Nathan Murphy in that grand final with the concussion and then him being out, it's a good point that you made on Darcy Moore, because I think he freed up Darcy Moore a lot to play that interceptor role, because he could sort of lock down on players, and they haven't really found anyone. So Reef McInnes is the guy in the preseason that's been sort of playing that Nathan Murphy role this season. If he can really lock down that spot and be a defender, it's not his primary position, but if he can kind of do a Nathan Murphy role, I think they're every chance to bounce.
Yeah, okay. And with they've obviously gone chips in on this year and probably next year, the way they've recruited. Do you think it'll pay off for the Pies? They got another one in them, or do you reckon they've probably missed that chance?
I don't know. Look, I don't know if they have enough. And with a team that is that old, you do have a lot of risk involved. Like you got Sidebottom, you got Pendles, those sort of guys. Even DeGoey's never been someone that's been, really able to play a lot of games throughout a season. He seems to pick up something as well. So I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong. If everything went right and they didn't get a lot of injuries throughout the season, I think they'll be competing. But I think this team's better than them, I suppose. Like you look at teams like Brisbane, and for me, like GWS, I'm a big fan of what they do. I think they're still above the Pies.
Fremantle,
yeah.
I think they should be with their list. They fucking should be up there, but time will tell. But,
yeah.
Well, Dylan actually does a live watch along on Thursday and Friday night games, is it, Dill? Is you going to be doing this year?
So it'll be one or the other. So we're doing round 0, the Hawks and Sydney game on Friday night, but it'll sort of be rotating between Thursday and Friday throughout the season.
Yep, and that's with another Fremantle spud as well, Grant.
That is,
I was
yeah.
gonna say
Drew's
victim
my
is probably the word I'd use.
yeah,
Victim.
yeah.
But
yeah. We're going to be
perfect.
getting guests on as well. Heppy's going to make an appearance throughout the season as well, I hear.
I'm going to come over there hopefully and just tear the joint to pieces.
Boost your followers.
It's not doing much for the Barron Files podcast at the moment. Is
Everyone
it?
ringing up saying, "Can you eat some cheese or do something fucking stupid?" Thanks very much, Dill.
Thanks for that, Dill. And we'll talk to you again, obviously, throughout the season. You're going to help us out with our fantasy football. We're going to sort of touch on injuries each week and who we should be trading in and trading out. And he's going to give us some advice on that. But that was absolutely fantastic, mate. Very
What a knowledgeable
very good to hear
man.
from you.
Awesome, guys. Thanks
All
very
right.
much.
Appreciate
Catch you
it,
later.
Dom.
Thanks
Cheers.
a lot. Right, that sort of that rounds out
It
us.
for sport.
That was it for
Those that are keen on
episode
AFL and those that are keen on
48,
fantasy.
49? No, 48. that
48.
was.
Yeah.
48. So,
Magic.
yeah. All right. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. YouTube is our main one.
Right.
So Dylan's actually filmed his part today. So he will have sat here throughout that whole video.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah. So that'll be cool.
I should have been going like that then.
Yeah, we should have been
Just
turning around and
turning,
talking to it. So, yeah,
In the wall.
But
very good.
but go and follow Dylan Alexander. He's absolutely fantastic at what he does. No one is doing what he's doing in the space of like the young footballers coming through the system. And that is where you're going to get all your information that you need to build your fantasy team in 2025 and beyond.
Yep.
Right. Love you all. Goodbye.